Get started. Okay, it looks like we're holding pretty steady here with this mount, so we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I will just quickly discuss how we will run the meeting. Tonight we are discussing mixed-use student housing zoning district and where that will be mapped. That was a district that was added by City Council in the zoning update that went into effect in April of this year. I will share my screen and go over some information about that here shortly. Just as a reminder or new information, if anyone wasn't here on Tuesday, we ask that you keep your cameras off. It just helps us to be able to concentrate and keep the meeting going, and also stay muted. After the presentation, which will be pretty short, we will open the comments for questions. So what we will ask is that you send questions to, we have, let's see, two staff people moderating tonight. That is Ryan Roebling and Keegan. So you can see them in the participant list, and you should be able to send chats to them. So you would send them a chat with your question, and then they will take turns reading them aloud. And then myself and Eric Grulich, Senior Zoning Planner, will address them. If there are any that we can't give full sufficient answer to tonight, then we will post on the website after this meeting in the next few business days. Consolidated questions from tonight with answers from staff. So that should be available to you and anyone else who gets on the website as well. We will also be posting a new survey in the morning that will be related to this specific topic, and the general survey will come down, and we ask that you get on and share your thoughts there as well. So I'm going to go ahead and start. Okay. So the topic tonight, again, is the mixed-use student housing zoning district. This district was created as a response to an ongoing discussion in the community for a number of years about whether or not there should be dedicated land that just allows slightly more student-focused housing, and which would focus where that housing could be created, and maybe take some pressure off of other parts of town that would no longer have that type of housing. So that in that way, that discussion often revolves around number of units in each, number of bedrooms in each unit. So you can see the purpose statement here. This is actually from the Unified Development Ordinance. So the comprehensive plan addressed student housing locations, and that it recommends that student housing should be located away from the downtown. So that was a change from the previous long-range plan, the growth policies plan. And we had a boom of student housing in the downtown area, a small one, and people decided during the comprehensive plan outreach portion of that project that they would like to see it located in other areas. So outside of the downtown and in close proximity to Indiana University were the two major takeaways from the comprehensive plan. And then the plan also specifically identified the Gateway North area as an appropriate example for increased student housing. So I'm going to briefly show you here the dimensional standards. So buildings in these areas can be larger than in some of the other areas in town. A primary structure in this area can be up to 6 stories, not to exceed 75 feet in height. And so obviously that's a little bit bigger than in some other areas of town. One thing I do want to stress, and you'll probably hear us say a bunch of times throughout the course of the next number of weeks before this goes to the public hearing process, and then again through that process, is that the mixed use student housing district just allows for student housing, right? So it's not only student housing, and it also allows for a number of other uses, some other residential uses, some already exist that are already existing in these areas, and then also some uses such as fraternity and sorority that are related to the university, and then some other supportive, commercial uses as well. So you can see here on the map, we are currently proposing, oh, thank you.
Come on, boy, we're going outside.
3 or 4 areas for mixed use student housing. So you can see those here. We've got the area here. This is Gateway North. These areas are located in that portion, again, identified by the comprehensive plan. And we have an area here much closer to the central part of campus, just west, and then an area at the southeast part of campus. So I also wanted to clarify the definition of student housing, or just make that available. And this presentation will go up on the website after this meeting as well, in a similar way as the other story maps were there. So you are able to click through these also after tonight, and of course ask questions again at the end of this presentation. So student housing is defined specifically in the code. That is a new change with the UDO, and a way to address concerns of the community, but also to allow for what we obviously need, a place for our students to live, and some who want to live in groups, that be available. So the main difference is that you are classified as student housing if you have any units in your building or complex with 4 or more bedrooms, or if more than a third of your living units are 3 bedrooms. And so though that use is has been added, and now restricts where what the community has kind of decided is a typical definition of student housing would be allowed, and that is now allowed in these areas. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit on each of these. And again, this will be on the website, so you will be able to do this as well. You can use this map, it's interactive. So to see these areas a little bit closer before we get into them, we're looking at north of 14th here, with Walnut mostly being the western border, and then expanding across past Miller Showers into areas that are currently existing student housing, primarily there on the west side of Miller Showers on College Avenue, and then incorporating some land here west of Indiana, expanding that a little bit east across as well. And then the second node that we identified was this area here that is bordered by 10th and Woodlawn, and 7th and Indiana. And then the third is the commercial node currently at 3rd and Jordan. So both of these second areas that we have identified are listed as urban village centers in the comprehensive plan. So for those who weren't here, or just as a refresher from Tuesday, these maps are interactive, so there are zoom in and out over here on the bottom right, a legend for the districts on the bottom left, and then actually at the top as well, you can put in an address if you were curious where these are in relation to something specific. So we also wanted to include a way for you to see what historic districts are in these areas. That was a discussion that we have had, let me see if I can, sorry, my Zoom window is in the way here. So this will be, again, something that you can use. It's interactive. You can turn on and off those local historic districts and then zoom to the two that are related to this topic. So this is Garden Hill here. You can see shaded in a historically single family area in the southern part of what we are proposing for mixed use student housing in the Gateway North. And then we have University Courts and a couple of other single local districts here at the 10th and Woodlawn proposal. So those are of note to mention because as many of you know, local districts in town have their own design guidelines. They're not all the same. Each district makes that determination themselves. But those would still be in play. That's a second layer of regulation besides zoning. So any petition, for example, for structure for student housing in any of these areas would also have to get approval from the Bloomington Historic Preservation Commission and meet any of the requirements that are currently in those historic districts as well. So that often adds an extra layer of compatibility to new development that they get to weigh in and make sure that scale and materials are similar. So the first one we'll look at today is Gateway North. And you can get on and see this as well. So this is the existing zoning that came through with the conversion map in April. And you can see, again, traditional single family down here on the south side, and then multifamily and commercial primarily on the north end. And then we are proposing to rezone those to mixed use student housing. Many of the uses that exist in these current 4 or 5 current zoning districts also do exist in the mixed use student housing. So making the change does not turn those lawful non-conforming. They still are permitted uses and can go on and be expanded and all those types of things that are sometimes of a concern when zoning changes. This change just allows for the student housing use to be an option in these areas. And then at 10th and Indiana, 10th Indiana, Woodlawn, and 7th, again, are the 4 streets that border this proposal area. And they are there are only currently 2 districts in this area. So residential multifamily is one of them, as well as mixed use institutional. So Indiana University does own some of these properties, as many of you who have been around planning for a long time probably know. They are not actually beholden to local planning and zoning law. So we typically, that is why their properties are zoned institutional. We zone the entire campus and most of the property that they own institutional. But they're actually not subject to that zoning either. We just give them a designation because they are in our zoning area. Were they to sell any of those properties, obviously then the zoning would be in place for the private property owner who purchased it. So that's the idea here, is that yes, some of these properties are owned by Indiana University, and no, they are not beholden to our rules. If in the lifespan of this zoning code, something were to change and they would want to be relieved of those properties, then we would already have the zoning in place that we feel is appropriate in this area. So we are proposing, again, that this whole kind of little block here be rezoned to mixed use student housing. And there are also some private property owners in here, obviously in the multifamily, but also in the institution. And then 3rd and Jordan is a little bit different because it is the commercial node there at 3rd and Jordan that currently has a small convenience store and Soma and other businesses along 3rd. They are currently zoned commercial. They are zoned mixed use neighborhood. And then we would be proposing, again, to change that to mixed use student housing. And many of those uses are allowed. The uses that exist there now, would be also allowed in the new zoning district, so they would not become lawful nonconforming. But this would allow for future redevelopment of this area. So we have looked at the lifespan of some of this development and think that it's possible that this area could redevelop in, again, the lifespan of this code. And that is why we are proposing to change the zoning. The reason I mentioned that is different is because obviously it has more of a commercial focus than the other two areas. For example, in the Gateway North, there is a lot of existing student rental there. So I mentioned those that are west of College, but there are also a number of developments east of College, and then also quite a large percentage of the single family stock there is also currently used as rental. And that is obviously different here because it is mostly commercial. So one thing we wanted to highlight, especially in relationship to this particular node, I would say, and portions of the 10th and Indiana as well, is that the new code included something new that was meant was put in order to help create a buffer for existing housing stock, existing single family, existing primarily residential districts adjacent to potential new development. So they're called neighborhood transition standards. And the code references here, and then we put them here. Again, this is available on the website, or will be available on the website, and is also, of course, available in the Unified Development Ordinance that's always on the website. But basically, just a second. Way. Basically, the idea is that if you are developing adjacent to a traditionally residential zoning district that would maybe be considered single family, so the RE through R4 in the existing draft, and in the existing UDO, then there are additional setbacks that you have to meet in order to have height above the height allowed in the adjacent district. So if you are within, for example, 50 feet of one of the 5 districts that I mentioned, which is going to potentially be going down to 4 with this update, but basically one of the R1 through R4 districts, then you can't build, that portion of your building cannot exceed the maximum height of the adjacent district. So that could come into play for the 3rd and Jordan node because it is surrounded by R3, at least on 2 sides. Let's look at it again. Yeah, so to the south and to the east, there is some R3. And so those immediate neighbors would then have that extra protection for large buildings that could be built in the MS district would have to still meet this requirement. And so then there's a kind of an example drawing that we got from that is in the Unified Development Ordinance. I am going to ask any of the other planners who are here tonight, was there anything I mentioned that that you of importance that I haven't already called out?
No, I think that was a good job. Good synopsis.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. Okay, so that's kind of the basics of where they're located, why we chose them, and what we're hoping to get out of, mixed use student housing is a district that was created by council. The idea is, as stated in the purpose statement at the beginning, that we would like to have areas where we're providing a mix of housing opportunities for students. It's not necessarily students only in these areas, but places that would make it maybe easier to locate buildings that we may find slightly more undesirable in other areas of town. We want those to be close to campus, along major corridors, and those are kind of the reasons why we chose the 3 areas that we did, and we're hoping to get feedback from the community tonight and via the website, and then of course once the actual public hearing process starts, about ideas about the 3 areas that we chose, and then any new areas that you think may be appropriate. So if you have questions, we would love to hear them. You can start your chat and you can send questions again to either Keegan or Ryan Roebling, and they will kind of take turns reading them out, and Eric and I will do our best to answer them. Again, if something can't be answered tonight, we will compile everything that goes in the chat is compiled and saved, and we will consolidate those questions. If there are a few in one topic, we may not put your specific question on, but we will address all of the questions in writing and put that on the website as soon as we can. Again, there will be a survey up after this meeting about mixed use student housing. And one of the questions is very open-ended. Did you have anything else that you wanted to contribute about this proposal related to this district? And so we will ask that you please do get on and fill that out. It's helpful for us to have those responses. And of course, our surveys are not scientific. They're just another way for us to gain information and opinions from the public. So we would love for you to do that. So go ahead and start, I think. Keegan, did you get any questions?
Nothing yet.
Okay, let's see.
Okay, I have some questions.
Okay,
from
perfect.
the Square Beacon.
Great.
So there's three. So I'll just go until someone else has asked one, and then I'll come back if that happens. So the first one, there's a rezone request for Brownstone Terrace that the City Council will be asked to approve sometime soon. From PUD to MS, could you comment on why it's not reasonable strategy to add MS to the map just as rezoning requests come up?
Eric, do you want to take that, or do you want me to address it?
So that is the only request that we've had so far for the student housing district, and they wanted to initiate that request to kind of get the ball moving a little bit faster because they weren't sure how long this rezoning process would take. So certainly everybody has the right to file for a petition. So that's why they're coming forward a little bit sooner than the overall rezoning map. Hopefully
oh yeah, sure. And I'll just add to that, Dave, that we have areas that we will have identified, and even plainly through the comprehensive plan plainly calls out Gateway North, that we think it's important to proactively rezone those and not only reactively respond to petition requests. So of course we will respond to petition requests as well, and analyze those areas and their appropriateness. But we don't want to wait only for that, because this is a need that the community has identified, and we want to be proactive on identifying locations. I think those two things answer your question. Ryan, did you have another one?
Yeah. The proposed areas for R4 were identified by calculating buffers around existing parcels. Was there a similar objective methodology for identifying MS zoning district? For example, distance from campus edges.
Oh, that's a great question. We did, I would say, less scientific way of finding the MS, but part of what we did for R4, and I think I tried to explain this a little bit last night, but we did start out with the math, and then we looked at those areas that came out, those nodes that and clusters that came through from the work that Ryan did identifying those locations, and we looked at the purpose statement for R4 in the code and tried to make sure that we felt that all of those met as well. So in that way, that was similar. We used what we knew about mixed use student housing from the purpose statement in the Unified Development Ordinance, and how it was intended to interact with the university to basically look around the entirety of the university and identify areas that we felt would work best with the new district. If I missed anything, please feel free to jump in, anybody. Okay, I think we're ready for the next one.
All right, I got one more. Isn't the HPC almost certainly going to deny an application for size of structures that MS contemplates? Doesn't MS become almost a hypothetical or theoretical exercise in those areas? Or is this in the same spirit as applying MS zoning to buildings owned by Indiana University?
It's a good question. We did not actually analyze the requirements for each of the districts. So as I mentioned, depending on the district, they can be wildly different. Some of our areas are very restrictive and some are not. So they cannot stop a project, obviously based on use. If they did not find that it was compatible with their historic design guidelines, then they would typically what they've done in the past, if you are trying to get a certificate of appropriateness, you have to meet the design guidelines. If you don't meet the design guidelines, they're happy to work with you to try to figure out a way to do so. So it would be the same process as any typical development. I think there's also maybe a misconception that just because it's student housing, it would be large. Again, that's kind of why we included the definition of student housing. So anything with 4 or 5 bedrooms is going to be student housing. And more than 1 unit. So I'm sorry, more than 4 units. So though it could be a smaller project that would fit scale, that would still need to fit the guidelines and could be approved by HBC. Eric, did I say something weird there?
No, that's just what I was going to say is, somebody could certainly come in with a 2-story or 3-story structure with, 4 or 5 bedrooms in there that would still technically meet the definition of student housing, but could get approval based on the guidelines for that specific district. So it doesn't have to be large buildings. It could certainly still be a building that's compatible with the neighborhood.
Yep. Ryan or Keegan, do you have any others?
I do not.
Okay, I have a question. It doesn't pertain to MS. So if you would like to field it, let me know.
Okay, what is it?
It includes plexus is
Okay,
one of
well,
the topics.
I'll
So-
come back to you because I got a couple, I think. But if we can get to that in a sec. We're trying to focus tonight again on mixed use student housing. So it may be something that we would just have to add to the Plex conversation when that comes around, for whoever asked that. But we got a question from the BEDC. Hi, BEDC. Thank you for joining us. Some people were not able to attend tonight. Will this recording be posted? Yes, it will be posted on our website. And I will pull that up here in a moment. So all of the recordings, currently the recording for Tuesday is a link to Cats. Thank you, Cats. But we are internally recording them as well. So we will soon switch that recording over, and this recording will go up as well. Let's see, have you taken into consideration the trend since the pandemic for students to engage online learning from home? The demand for rentals in historically student neighborhoods seems to be decreasing, judging by the number of for rent signs visible throughout the year. So I would say we had this discussion a little bit the last time when we came through with the Unified Development Ordinance. What we have heard from a lot of local renters and then also rental companies is the signs are up all year because they're renting for next year already. We do not have a lot of vacant homes sitting around waiting for people to occupy them. We are obviously in very weird times and we don't know exactly what the effect of that is going to be. So yes, it's possible that there will become less of a need for student housing in the community. Anything could happen. If IU chooses to, allow and switch to a more permanent online learning environment, we don't know the answer to that question. This particular change, and actually, I would say all of the changes that we're proposing to the map and the texts, none of them are required, right? So many of the uses, if not all, I just hesitate to say all without checking specifically, but almost all of the uses, again, that are in the areas we are proposing to be rezoned would still be lawful, would still be conforming uses, and no one has to do the uses that are either being, for example, with the plexus being proposed or in the mixed use student housing being allowed newly in those areas. So student housing. So yes, it is possible that the need for offsite student housing will not continue to grow. People often talk about on the cliff, and are there going to be less children, less kids, young adults going to college, in a number of years. All of those things are possible. Another thing we like to highlight, or are trying to say in meetings, that we do think a lot of people know, but maybe people, if you're not intimately involved with city zoning code or city code at all, you may not realize, these are they are the code. They are requirements, and they are the law of what you can do on your property, but they can be changed. So if we were to pass this and for some reason you're right, and enrollment went drastically down, I'm sure that many things would be revisited in Bloomington, including potentially the zoning code, to make adjustments for that, if it was clear that that wasn't coming back. But this particular change doesn't require anything related to students. It only opens up options for development in these areas that are otherwise kind of more spread out around town in a way that the community decided they did not prefer when we went through with the comprehensive plan and then the unified development ordinance update. Okay, Keegan or Ryan, anything else? Sorry,
Nothing.
related to student housing? Go ahead.
Nothing yet.
Okay. Nothing, Ryan?
No.
Okay, well, I mean, this is just mostly an information session, right? So I will pull up the website to show those who haven't seen it, where they can find information. Just a moment. I can here. Okay, so this is the website in bloomington.in.gov/planning/UDO/map/updates. And this is the editor version, so you won't see those options to change it, obviously. Let me see here. Sorry about that. Okay, so here's the website. If this is the first time you've engaged with us, welcome. We are excited to see and hear your comments. There are two story maps here, one about the zoning district mapping, and then one about text changes. We have interactive map and PDF map resources, and then the presentation from Tuesday's meeting is already up. We are working on responding to the chat questions that were submitted that night, and then tonight's will also go up when those are done. Again, I mentioned this survey will update, and it will be about this topic. So please do get on if you're interested and check that out. And then that is where that's located. I know someone asked. So we will also be starting office hours next week. That information will go up on here tomorrow, which will basically be for those who can't engage in the evenings. We know sometimes that's difficult, especially now. If you can sneak an hour or so during the day, then we would have a planner available who could answer questions. Let's see. Okay, good question. Let's see. What type of feedback is most useful for the mapping process? What specifics are most helpful to hear from employers and residents? I think the most helpful information is specific about the proposals. So not just generally, I like the neighborhood I live in, or, kind of non-specific to what's actually being proposed, but that, yes, we think that the mixed-use student housing area that you've proposed is appropriate, and here's why. Or, yes, on a wider berth than just tonight's meeting. Yes, we want to make sure that we are having a map and text amendments that protect our investments, or provide more options for our employers for housing or things like that. But or I guess I should say sentiments like that are important, and those, but the most useful to us would be direct responses to the things that we, the proposals that we're making. Does anybody else have any questions? We could call it pretty short if no one does, but we're happy to stay. I'm just going to stick around, but in case we get any new people. Okay. Well, I will probably run through the proposal again. I mean, the story map again for anyone who joined after. And so for those of you who've already seen it, if you don't have any questions, that's all we're going to be doing. And we appreciate you coming and watching and participating. And please check out the website and fill out the survey. Oh, Ryan, do you have another one?
So I have one and then one coming.
Okay, great.
So one is, it's not MS related directly, but I think it's a good question you might want to answer. Where can you find information about how many bedrooms and unrelated adults for each of the zoning types? For example, R3, MS, R4, etc.
Sure. So in the definition of family, just a minute here. Find it. Okay, hold on just a sec. Let me share my screen again. Okay, so this is the Unified Development Ordinance, which is online, and I think it's just bloomington.in.gov/UDO. If you go to the city website and search UDO, you can easily find it. And then this is obviously just the definition of family. So a family can live in a unit, and this is where what you often hear. This has changed a little bit from the last code. It was a little bit different. It didn't explicitly very well call out some of the protected class items that are here. And you will hear people say that in largely single family districts, it's 3, and then in other districts, it's 5. So this is actually where that comes from. So an individual or group of people who are related by blood marriage, legal adoption, and then it goes on a little bit. That's one family. And then you can see here under number 4, this is the traditional one that people refer to when talking about limiting student living in many of our detached dwelling unit areas of town. So in the R1 through R4, no more than 3 unrelated adults and their dependent children can live together. I think that answered the question. Was that the question, Ryan?
I believe that answered the question. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
And then what was your other one?
It says this one, B square beacon again. Are there any general principles that apply to where zoning lines go that a specific request should try to respect? For example, I don't want my parcel zoned R4. It might not be possible request to honor if that would make an island in the middle of R4 district. Can zoning lines divide blocks? How gerrymandered can lines be?
Sure. So I guess that's a good question. It's hard. That's a good question. It's hard because obviously we deal with the historic zoning lines, right? And they were created for different reasons, sometimes based on use, or sometimes rezones happened and changed things. And so ideally, it would not be very gerrymandered at all. What we kind of didn't do, we didn't do very many. We had 20 what we were calling 20 rezones that aren't part of the larger PUD rezone or 3 new district rezones. And some of those address that where it seems like zoning was off a little bit, and we tried to kind of even out an edge based on use, or something was left over from an old use that's no longer there, so the district didn't make sense. I think I would say that our goal is to make the districts as consistent as possible around and to the surrounding districts. That kind of doesn't make sense. Sorry, to have them be non-gerrymandered, I guess is the term. But the problem with that is every district has an edge, right? So somewhere the neighbor across the street or behind the house is going to have a different zoning than the person who is their neighbor. And so someone lives there. And so someone always feels, my experience is not just working in Bloomington. I worked for Monroe County Planning for a number of years. That was often a big issue, that people didn't understand why their side of the road was one thing and the other side of the road was the other. We did have to just make some choices. I think Mr. Roebling did a good explanation on Tuesday about how those decisions were made for the R4 districts. We tried to identify the clusters and then go to the nearest right of way. And that's how those that's how those cutoff points were made. I think we're kind of open to anyone asking, if they feel that theirs is inappropriate and wanting to explain the reason, then I think that's fine. And we will look at them. We will look at all of them. So yeah, taking a couple parcels out in the middle of a sea of R3 and changing those to R2, that's not going to make a lot of sense. But if you're near an edge or a whole corner seems like it would make sense to come off and switch over, that may be something we would be able to look at. I hope that answers the question. Did you have another one, Ryan?
Yes. Do use specific standards apply to student housing districts or are they called something else?
Use specific standards are attached to a use, right? So if a use is permitted in mixed use student housing, and it has use specific standards, then very likely they would apply. Sometimes use specific standards are zone specific. So they may say, if the use is single family detached, and if a use specific standard was something having to do, this isn't in our code, but something having to do with, a particular type of roofing material, it may say only in, districts 1 and 2. And then it wouldn't apply across. So it kind of just depends on what the use is. It's possible that you could have use specific standards that were applicable in the mixed use student housing. Did you have any others?
I think that was it for me.
Okay, cool. Let's see. I got a question from Laura. Can you share the mathematical formulas you use to calculate whether a neighborhood would be an appropriate candidate for rezoning? Okay, so for the mixed use student housing districts, we did not use a mathematical formula to make that decision. Again, we used the guidance from comprehensive plan, as well as the purpose statement in the Unified Development Ordinance to try to locate areas that seemed like they would be appropriate for that district and potential redevelopment. And then we had a discussion on Tuesday about how our 4 districts were created, and that we will have that discussion again in another meeting where we will discuss more about our 4, but that video is on the website for that specific district. Otherwise, we only made the only other changes we proposed were PUDs, planned unit developments, those to go to regular code districts, and then the 20 or so that I mentioned that were seemed appropriate for enhancement or correction in different parts of town. Eric, did I miss anything on that, do you think?
No, I mean, for the big thing for the student housing was the location, and was something already surrounded by existing high density student family oriented developments, and is that location where we think that use is appropriate. So it was a little bit more subjective than objective.
I got a new question.
Okay.
It's not, again, not exactly about MS, but you covered it, so I figure it's relevant. Do the transition standards you mentioned for student housing apply from moving from R3 to R4, for example?
Eric, will you weigh in on that? Do
Yeah.
they apply
so
in all districts? Go ahead.
Yeah, so the transition applies to all districts. I'll verify that real quick, but I'm pretty sure we included the R4 in that. Yes, the R4 is included. RE, R1, R2, R3, and R4.
Oh, but the question was, I think if you're building adjacent R3 to R4, does it apply? That one we might have to, that's kind of a confusing, hold on.
I mean, it would be, the only thing that would apply would be the height. So yes, because it says any projects abutting a property. So technically, yes, while the difference might be negligible.
Yeah.
For instance, the R3, the height is 35 feet, and the R4, it's 40 feet.
Then you'd have to go with the
impacts
lower.
are going to be so negligible.
Okay. Thank you. Ryan, anything else? Or Keegan?
I don't currently have anything.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Actually, there's a slight follow-up to that question. What about between PUDs and zoning, neighborhood zonings?
So we would use whatever the PUD is similar to. For instance, if it was a residential PUD, then we would group that into whatever zoning district it is most similar to and apply that for the transition. So yes, we would figure out what that use is within the PUD and then apply a transition appropriate to that.
But if they're building in a PUD, then a PUD sets its own rules. So just for if anyone doesn't know what a PUD is, and Mr. Rooker I can check with legal about this, but my feeling would be is that if you were building in a PUD and you were adjacent to one of the neighborhood transition standard protected zoning districts, I don't know that the neighborhood transition standards would apply because the Unified Development Ordinance does not apply specifically to the PUD because the PUD has its own code, basically. But we can verify that and update that in the questions on the website too. That's a good question. It's a little bit uncommon for us. Does anyone else have any questions? Yeah, that's right. The PUD code would not have to take into effect. If the building is happening in the PUD code would not have to take the transition rules into account. But what Eric was describing was if you are in a PUD and someone is building next to you, then we would identify the most closely related district for the PUD side. If it was one that, for example, seemed like was single family development, and then that's how you would have to do the transition standards as though it were that district. I hope that made sense. Anything else, Ryan?
I think that's it this time.
Okay, I'm going to run through it again because we had some joiners and since it's so short. And then we'll do questions again at the end if anyone has any. And also just so everyone knows, let's see. Rick, if you have a question, you can go ahead and send it to Ryan in the chat or me or anybody, any of the hosts. And I will go ahead and let's see, I can send you a chat maybe. And then I will do the run through the presentation again. Thank you all for being here. If you do leave, well, I would understand if you don't necessarily want to listen to it a second time, but we really appreciate your interest and participation. Please do check out the website and come back as the meetings unfold for the other topics. We hope that you will be interested in those as well. Okay. Okay, so again, tonight's meeting is focused on the mixed-use student housing zoning district proposal, and what locations staff has proposed for that new zoning district. So the zoning district was created in the Unified Development Ordinance that was approved in April. This is the district purpose. So the district was created in response to obviously we live in a college town, in response to student development that's taken place over time, and this district was created in response to the comprehensive plan, which identified areas, said that they would like to have a district that could be more focused on student housing, away from downtown, and close to campus. So was created through the legislative process as a new district. And then this process is finding physical, map locations where those make sense based on this purpose statement. So as I mentioned before, the comprehensive plan proposes that student housing be located away from downtown and in close proximity to Indiana University. And you can see here 3 locations that we chose to meet that bill. The comprehensive plan also specifically calls out the North Gateway, Gateway North, I'm sorry, and that is this location here that you can see. And then we also chose 2 other locations that meet the away from downtown and close to campus to kind of provide opportunity for this type of district on different sides of campus. So the MS dimensional standards, the key one that's probably of most interest to people is that the height allowed would be 6 stories, not to exceed 75 feet. So that's, again, quite a bit larger than in some of our other districts. And then something of note to mention is that this wouldn't just be all student housing, right? So that is not the intent. And so many of the uses that already exist in these areas are permitted and would be able to go on as is, as permitted uses, and not even be changed to lawful nonconforming, which sometimes is a concern when there is a rezone. So this is the list of permitted uses and conditional uses that is currently in the UDO for this district. So what the MS district does allow is the addition of student housing. So student housing or dormitory use is allowed in multiple places, but the main locator of those that we would like to see happen would be in the MS district. So student housing or dormitory was identified as its own use, separate of typical multifamily, so that because over time the community has decided, for example, that developments with units that have 4 or more bedrooms are often catered to students. And so that is one of the options here, that if your multifamily dwelling development has units of 4 or more bedrooms, then you are classified by our code as student housing or dormitory. Additionally, if more than a third of your units have 3 bedrooms or more, you again would be classified as student housing or dormitory. So these uses, this is already in code, this definition, and these uses would be allowed in this district. So for those of you who haven't seen yet, this is our one of our interactive maps. There's a legend down on the bottom left to see what the district colors are that surround. You can use the search on the top left if you're looking for a particular address to see how close it is to these areas, and then zoom is down on the bottom right, in and out. And then we have 3 zoom in buttons here for convenience of these 3 particular areas, so you can click better to see the boundary lines of these 3 areas. So Gateway North I mentioned, which again is from the last presentation, sorry, goes from the railroad all the way to the bypass. You can see there, and then extending west of College Walnut into some existing largely student housing apartment complexes as well. And then the second area is bordered by Indiana 10th, Woodlawn, and 7th. And that was denoted as an urban village center in the comprehensive plan. And Third and Jordan was also an urban village center, and is currently, of course, a small commercial node. It's on the southeast side of campus, adjacent to the southeast side of campus, excuse me. Something else we included here is a layer of the historic districts. So there is a historic district, Garden Hill, that is in the southern portion of the Gateway North proposed MS district area. And there is another University Courts that is a large part of this area here for 10th and Woodlawn. We wanted to put these in because as we've discussed in other areas of town, when there is a local historic district, that provides another layer of protection for the development in that area. So development can occur here, and the zoning code regulations obviously are in place and do regulate the development at these sites, but also depending on how detailed the local district regulations are for the historic districts, they also may have extra regulation that has to be met, or for example, extra development standards that may be more stringent than those in the zoning code. And so those both have to be met. So that's something to keep in mind for development that will occur in those areas. Okay, so Gateway North, this is the existing zoning for that area. You can see a traditional detached dwelling zoning down here, multifamily dwelling up here with commercial along Walnut. And then you can slide over to see the areas that we are proposing to go to mixed use student housing. Something of note is that many of the uses already here or permitted by these districts are also permitted in student housing, which I showed the use table at the beginning. Oh, and just so everyone knows, I don't think I've said this yet this time, this will go up on the website later tonight. These are all interactive, so obviously you can get on yourself and look at some of this stuff if you need to see more detail. So again, Indiana and 10th Urban Village Center. The zoning that is there now is residential multifamily and mixed use institutional. Obviously, it's immediately adjacent to campus, so that was a large draw for identifying this area here, as well as the existing zoning. So we would be taking the whole, proposing that the entirety of this square shown here would be mixed use student housing. So of note, IU owns some of these properties that are zoned mixed use institutional. Their property, so that zoning is a zoning district with regulations and uses, but Indiana University is not beholden to local planning and zoning, so they don't have to follow any of those regulations. So even if it were to be rezoned to mixed use student housing, they still would not have to follow any of the regulations from our zoning code. That if this mixed use student housing was in place, then were they to sell them in the lifespan of this code, then we would already have a district in place that we feel is appropriate in this area. And that's why we've included those properties. And then here we have Third and Jordan Urban Village Center. This is Soma and Bears and Mother Bears location and the immediately surrounding areas near the southeast side of campus. And it is currently zoned mixed use neighborhood. So a small commercial here and then multifamily. And so we'd be proposing for the whole rectangle to go to mixed use student housing. And that would allow for some, if this area were to redevelop again in the lifespan of this zoning code, then that would allow for some student housing to more easily be located in this area. So I'm going to briefly, again, talk about the neighborhood transition standards. The code references here, this is from the Unified Development Ordinance, and it indicates it was included so that large buildings built near traditional detached dwelling unit neighborhoods would have to respect a larger, functionally a buffer related to their height. So they would only be able to be the maximum height of the adjoining district within a certain number of feet. So that would apply at 3rd and Jordan because it's surrounded by on two sides by R3, and a small area at the 10th and Woodlawn as well. So you may not get the height that mixed use student housing allows at the 3rd and Jordan node if it were to be rezoned that way. All the way around the node, those along the edge may not be able to have the height that would be allowed. But they would be able to, again, incorporate that use of student housing to be able to have units with more bedrooms, which immediately close to campus is probably the best location for those. Okay, so that's that. Does anybody have any questions? You can send questions. Oh, looks like I have a few, or you can send questions to Ryan Roebling or Keegan Gulick as well. Oh, hi, Rick. Sorry if you missed our thing at the beginning. We're not doing video. I'm going to wave at you, but then I'm going to turn you off. But okay, I'm going to read Rick's question here. Thank you. Sorry, I know that's kind of a pain. It's hard to administer. And we never know how many people are going to be there. There were about 90 last night. So we just did on Tuesday, a straight rule for all the meetings. Okay, so Rick has a non-mixed use student housing question. Ryan or Keegan or Eric, do any of you have a student housing question before I jump into this one?
I do not know.
Okay.
No.
No. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Rick's question is related to the proposal for R4 houses in this area near Hawthorne and Jordan. Will that allow them to be rented to 4 or more unrelated students? No, not if they're 1 unit. So the maximum number of unrelated adults per unit stays the same. If a house was converted to some sort of plex, then the number would go up. Yes. It is a very lovely neighborhood, agreed. Okay, let's see. Okay, let's see here. Laura asks if we can talk about the decision to push for more student housing in off-campus community versus coordinating with IU. Seems like that would be more compatible with the responsibility of the university. Yes. Yeah, so coordination with IU on how they're going to use their land is not something that happens at the level of planning and transportation development services staff. So I can't really answer that question. Yes, I think it's widely agreed that more housing on IU land would be great. We don't know, the reasons why they do and don't do the things that they do. Stewards of that land and that university that they are. So we have to respond to the realities of the community that we live in. And so we plan not for IU, but for the community, and students are part of the community. So we have to be realistic. And students aren't the only ones who want to live in town that maybe can't. So we are trying to find numerous ways to hopefully make that easier for people to be able to do. Yes, Rick, house could be converted.
But again, Jackie, as you talked about
thank you,
earlier,
Eric.
these don't have to be for students. These are
Right.
buildings that could be multifamily, that could be rentals. This is just an area where taller buildings could be appropriate with larger bedroom counts, and they can rent to anybody. It's not just specifically student oriented.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that. We are going to try to keep saying that. So, or for example, the way that the council decided to define student housing, again, with saying, that if you have any units with 4 bedrooms or more, is student housing. That can also, of course, be a rental for, a large family who's only going to be here a certain amount of time or wants to live in an apartment, or, it could be for anyone. It's not limited to the user. It's just a way to allow for that definition to be located in these areas that we think will most often be students, and allow them to be in areas that are adjacent to campus. Does anyone else have any questions? Oh, hold on. Sorry. Okay, Rick, you should come to the meeting that we're going to talk about plexes. It's not tonight. This means about the student housing, multi-use student housing zoning district. And there will be at least one meeting about plexes, and that the dates for those will go up next week on the website, but I believe they will be the week after that. So 2 weeks from now, and we will, I'm sure, delve into lots and lots of questions about plexes. Only because they're good questions, and there are a lot of people. There were 90 people at the meeting on Tuesday. There are a lot of people who want to hear answers to those questions, and they're not here because I tried to make it clear what this meeting was about, so they don't want to miss out on those answers, for sure. Anything from anybody else? Okay, well, if anyone has questions, you can feel free to send them in the chat to any of the hosts or co-hosts that you see on the meeting in the participant list. And basically that is all we have for the presentation. So again, there will be a survey that goes up on the website tomorrow, and it will be a new survey focused on this topic, mixed use student housing. And that will be up until the next presentations happen the week after the election. And then at that time, they will change again, focused on the topic of that week, which I believe will be plexes, but we're not positive yet. So that will look at, watch the website for that. This presentation, the presentation with the interactive maps, will also go up on the website later tonight. So thank you everyone for spending your time with us. We appreciate your interest and are happy to answer any questions. Oh, no problem. Guys, if you don't want to stay, you don't have to. I'm just going to stick around till 7 in case people show up late so that they can ask questions if they want to.